From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. Our next piece of correspondence comes from the one and only Dark Sky. Here's what Dark Sky had to say. In your recent listener mail episode about death at Groom Lake, you touched briefly on international arms dealing. This seems like a good time to share something I found quite by accident recently. Out of general curiosity, I was viewing the wiki page for Sears, as in the nearly defunct U.S. retail chain. We know it well, Dark Sky. Somewhere on Wikipedia, I can't find it now, there was a reference to a subsidiary of Sears called Sears World Trade. Long story short, apparently Sears World Trade was involved in international arms deals and possibly providing cover for U.S. intelligence operations. This would have been in the early and mid-1980s. Here's a quote, says Dark Sky, from one of the Sears board members at the time. That name sure seems familiar. We received periodic reports on Sears World Trade as an entire company, but I don't personally remember being briefed on those particular activities, said, as I'm sure you can tell by the voice I'm doing, Donald Rumsfeld, former Secretary of Defense who was serving on Sears board at the time of the interview. And then Dark Sky goes on to share a couple of links to dig into and concludes with an attaboy for us saying, great show, keep it up. Thanks so much, Dark Sky, and keep the correspondence coming. Oh, man, you touched a nerve, dude. Sears, the pre-pandemic, the office that we all worked in was an old and historic Sears. On another show that our crew does, Ridiculous History, we explored the history of that building and Sears in general. If you are not from the U.S., you may not be familiar with this department store, but in its heyday, it was the Walmart of its time. It was ubiquitous. You could order everything from like shoelaces to guns to entire houses from Sears, and they would just ship it to wherever you happen to be at. So I have to say, I am surprised that I'm surprised we didn't talk about it in our earlier episode, but also at the same level, I don't know how you guys feel. I'm not surprised that Sears was doing this. What about you guys? Initial reactions before we break down what Dark Sky is referencing here.
I mean, they were very good at selling things. At least they had people on board who were excellent at that.
Well, they also invented catalog culture, and essentially not only sold things, but sold the concept of the kind of lifestyle you should have that required certain things. You know, they sort of invented like the American dream and sold it to the American people, essentially.
Well, and in this case, if your lifestyle is, being a warlord or, running a military in a different country that maybe doesn't have access to a ton of weapons manufacturing, they did a good job of showing them what life could be like.
Yeah. Fingers on a hand, as we've said before. The higher you get in any hierarchy, the smaller your circle becomes. And also, at the same time, as counterintuitive as it may sound, you are also more likely to have Venn diagram contacts with other industries, right? Like the average person working in a factory making widgets might not know the person who makes gadgets, but the guy who's in charge of that factory probably does know the guy or the person, who runs the gadget factory. That's just an unfortunate side effect of the tribalism of the species. And this is where it gets interesting, because Dark Sky sent us this great article. I feel like this is a fun I feel like this would be a fun live episode for us to do, but we want to introduce you to the Gucci Mane of this story with Sears. This guy named Frank Carlucci. If you are if you're a fan of reading about U.S. politics and you get really deep in the weeds, you might remember this guy as the national security advisor for a time to former President Ronald Reagan. After Carlucci left his job as the national security advisor, he got hired on at Sears to run this subsidiary, the dark sky mentioned, Sears World Trade. Sears World Trade, let's just unpack these Matryoshka dolls here. Sears World Trade had its own subsidiaries, and one of those subsidiaries, this thing it oversaw, had the name International Planning and Analysis Center Incorporated, a name that is just beige and blasé enough to be suspicious. Who was in charge of that? Who was in charge of that center? A retired 4-star general named James Allen, along with 12 other former military officers. They provided this subsidiary of a subsidiary of Sears. Look at those proxies. Admire those nesting dolls. They provided advice on how to sell anti-aircraft missiles, how to sell transport planes or flight simulators, radar, and trailers to the U.S. and Canada. So they were talking with private industry like defense manufacturers, and they were pulling contacts, which is what a lot of the public service folks who go to the dark side, that's what they end up doing. Their nepotism is their CV, their resume, you know?
Yeah. I mean, what we have on paper here, at least over the span of time since this was going down it was the 80s, correct, Ben? This is when this
that's
happened.
correct.
I'm making references to warlords and, selling weapons in other places that may be enemies of Western powers or something like that. But in this case, they are talking about the U.S. and Canada. When we know about something like this, I always have the suspicion that it goes deeper and it goes further out to more nefarious things. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, just because I feel that way. Just putting that out there.
I feel you, man. And that's a fair, gut check that everybody has to. What do we do in D&D? You got to roll initiative and you got to roll for constitution. You have to make sure that we're not going too far down a rabbit hole of conjecture versus a rabbit hole of fact. But there's a lot of stuff that doesn't look good for this. One of the main things being that when this story broke in the mid 1980s, I think around 86 or so, when this story broke, Sears' response was, it's a small part of the company, and we're going to sell it anyway. We might sell it to some other company. Okay, we might sell it to the people who run it now, which is chef's kiss. But then there was also the second aspect of sketchiness here is the deniability factor. Rumsfeld said, "Oh yeah, I don't remember doing that," and people at Sears were like, "Oh, was that what that subsidiary was doing? They're just so small. I didn't know about that." Yeah, that's crazy. which is kind of like iHeartMedia saying, "Podcast, huh? That's wild. We didn't know our podcast
cats."
Yeah, we didn't know our podcasting arm was doing podcast. Anyway,
what? That's what they're doing down there in Atlanta? Oh, all right.
Ben, what was the name of the division again?
The name of the first subsidiary is Sears World Trade. The name of the subsidiary that was doing the international arms trade consulting is International Planning and Analysis Center Incorporated, or IPAC.
Which is clearly a subsidiary of Illumination Global Unlimited, right?
Well, that's our show, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in. No, just kidding.
Yep, we shouldn't be talking about this.
Oh, no. You're right. You're on the money. Well, they're involved in pretty much every company, I think, at some point again. But this is fascinating because if you're interested in the history of Sears, please do check out that Ridiculous History episode. But also, I think this is indicative of just how much of a reach this place had. And and to me, okay, so I'm torn Hashtag Natalie Imbruglia. I'm wondering, like, what is the primary player in this Sears World Trade situation? Was it Sears making a lot of money? I would imagine not. I think it made less than 1% of their sales for quite a while. What it seems to me like, and this is without doing an episode on this, what it seems to me like is it seems as if some shady consulting was going on and it had the Sears brand name attached as kind of a cover or, like a sheep pelt for a wolf. What do you guys think? Am I off base there?
I feel like
Not
you're
at
right
all.
on the money, because I'm looking down at the bottom of this Washington Post article titled "Carlucci Supervised Arm Advisors at Sears." It's from 1986. Yep. Going down all the way to the bottom of it, and it's exactly what you're referencing. They're talking about Sears World Trade's revenue, Sears Roebuck's, which, the above them, and then IPAC. Total revenue at Sears Roebuck was $40.7 billion in 1985. And then IPAC only made $3.5 million.
Only.
Well, I mean, but think about that. $3.5 million is a huge amount of money in 1985. But think about the difference, like you're talking about. This tiny little arm, this thing within a thing, made that small amount. I can only imagine that it exists there for a reason that they haven't stated, in my mind. For them to keep around a thing that's that small and not divert those resources somewhere else where they can clearly be making lots more money, lets me know, or at least sets off my alarms, that this is important to them for some other reason.
Oh yeah, man. And there's another there's another piece to the puzzle. This is not quite the bow on the Christmas gift, but let's call this the wrapping for the present. Dark Sky, you also sent in a great article from The Nation, which is one of the first things that popped up to me as well. And this article is from 2002, and it talks about the further adventures of our man, Frank Carlucci. He's so Carlucci right now. He went on from Sears World Trade and IPAC to become the chairman of a returning guest on our show, the Carlyle Group. Fellow conspiracy realist. Yes.
No.
Yes. Zero poop involved. This is true.
Wow.
So,
oh man, Carlucci runs deep.
So let's check this out. So if you want to learn more about the Carlyle Group, you can go to their official website. If that's, if you're into airbrush art, go to their website and read their About Us. If you are into learning more about the controversy, check out a Wired article from 2010 by Spencer Ackerman, which talks about the reach of the Carlyle Group, because the Carlyle Group, it appears there's compelling evidence or circumstantial evidence that they're also deep in the arms trade. And before Carlucci went to the Reagan administration and cabinet, and before Carlucci went to Sears, and before Carlucci went to the Carlyle Group, he had a job at another company, the company. At least that's what we call it on this show. So from CIA to the executive branch to your favorite department store, if you were alive, if you were alive during its heyday, to an incredibly powerful global investment firm, it's just more and more I'm wondering, like, who is really voting in this country? By which I mean, who is affecting the decisions of policy? And it's so hard not to be cynical. You know what I mean? It's so hard not to think that these are fingers on a hand. And I'm not saying this is how everything works, but I'm saying in this case, I think Dark Sky is onto something. I think Sears just got caught up because their name looked clean,
Dude, there's so many dots to be connected here. I need a conspiracy board.
Yeah. You kill it at the conspiracy boards, though. You're amazing at that.
Oh, I can mock them up to shoot them on video for sure. I can make fake ones all day. Let's do it. But I need somebody out there that can actually connect these dots from Rumsfeld and Sears to all of these things.
Whoa,
Rumsfeld Rumsfeld when he brought Carlucci on, and then Rumsfeld when he's in office essentially, hanging out in the upper echelons like you talked about, those closed circles at the top. I mean, I just want to follow Rumsfeld, and then we'll follow Carlucci. Somebody out there put those two together.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Carlucci was also, by the way, kicking it with Project for New American Century. Shout out to them. Yep. On the U.S. Taiwan Business Council. He was a member of the board of trustees of the Rand Corporation. I'm telling you, man, it's deeper than rap. It's quote dead press. He was on the Drug Policy Alliance. Ooh, I mean, this guy.
Oh my God.
This guy had many, and I don't know if he had many interests, but he had a lot of organizations that he used to push his interest.
He was really on the Drug Policy Alliance?
Yeah, for sure. He was on the Drug Policy Alliance back in, he was a member of the honorary board.
Okay.
And that dates back to 2010. And, at this point, we cannot ethically draw hard conclusions about what Carlucci's motivations were, or what led him to be connected with so many organizations, some of which remain pretty controversial, I would say, in the modern day. But we can say that there are a lot of dots to connect.